All right, welcome to Lab 7. This one is all about pointers. We're going to get some practice with those as well as just libraries, making a bunch of files that all compile together. So, get that starter code, several files, and they're just for the two different parts for this lab. Okay, so the first part is called rotate3. And here's the idea. We're going to call a rotate3 function. This is what you're going to write. And you call it with three variables that you have, three ints. You give their locations because it's going to take them by address. You're going to call them with a pointer to x, pointer to y, and pointer to z. So you call rotate3, and here's what it's supposed to do to x, y, and z. It's supposed to rotate all the values. It's kind of like swapping. X moves into y moves into z, and z moves back into x. So it's like rotating that z value around into x. That's the idea. So that's rotate3, and let me show you that. So this is in rotate3.h. That is the declaration of this function that you'll be writing, and then you'll go and you'll write it in the CPP file. So implement it and make it so that when it takes those three int pointers, it rotates them and makes the memory values that those ints point to that those int pointers point to hold the correct new values that have been rotated. Okay. One key thing is if any of those pointers that you were given are null, remember you can't dereference the null pointer. So your function should stop early if any of that happens, if any pointer is null, because we don't want to try and dereference it. Okay. So that is the first thing that you'll do, and I've written a test file for you that you'll compile with your rotate3 library. It's called rotate3test.cpp. Here are a bunch of tests, and you should be pretty confident after you get them passing that your rotate3 is correct. Okay, so get that working, and then the second part is the more involved part. What I'd like you to do is create a fake class. Okay, this is going to make sense when I explain it, I promise, but we're going to use pointers to mimic that idea of that this thing, that this variable, that secret thing that was being used when we call methods, that secret this parameter that I was talking about. So we're going to do that with pointers. Okay, we're going to make a fake counter class because we love the counter class now, and we're going to use a struct. Okay, so let me build this up here to you. So here's counter.h. Definitely read these comments. But here is a counter struct. It will hold a count. And then remember that every method is secretly, if we were to make this a class, every method on the counter class would secretly take the object that you want to work on as the secret 0th parameter of that method. And so we're spelling that out. We're going to use structs and pointers to rule our own version of classes. All right? So that is the idea here. So every method, and I'm saying method with air quotes right now, every method is going to secretly, explicitly this time, take a pointer to a counter. Okay, that'll be our this that we want to modify. That's how we get at the thing that I want to construct. I want to construct this particular counter. I want to increment this particular counter. I want to reset this particular counter. I want to give back the count for this particular counter. Okay, so that's why we take that as a parameter. Secretly, we're spelling it out. So this is kind of how it's going to work. So if you're going to implement the counter inc function, which is secretly supposed to be a method, we're going to pass along a self parameter that holds the address of a counter object. Okay, and we're going to go through that. Your job is to go through that to increment the count, because it's the idea, or it's the job of the inc method / function to increment the count inside of a counter. Okay, so definitely read the comments. It'll make a lot more sense, but that is the gist of it. You are getting the object that you need to modify via a pointer, and it's your job to implement the functionality on counters based on the pointer that you're given. So take that self and reset it using the starting value. Take this self and go inside of it, get the actual counter out, and increment the count that's inside. Okay, so that's that. Implement all of those that are secretly supposed to mimic methods, and here's an example of how they will be used. For example, the constructor secretly, or explicitly this time, will look like this. So you make a counter object, it's just a struct for us in this case, and then we call construct with the address of that counter and 42. Okay, and so what should have happened was the constructor was called, it set that value inside of C's count to be 42, and it's checking that. Okay, same for inc. you make a counter, this time on the heap, ooh, and you construct it. We've inked it 3 times, and then we make sure that the count that we give back has been 3. It's been incremented properly. Okay, so all of these things should make sense, even if you don't fully understand why this is mimicking the way that classes work. I think you can at least understand that it's supposed to go inside of the C. Like the inc function is supposed to go inside of the C pointer, get the counter out, and increment the value that's inside of its count field. Okay, so all of those are the tests that I've made for you. And the very last thing is I want you to write a couple tests for that fake counter class for these functions that you've been making that mimic method. So just follow the style that I've been giving you, add 2 more, and that is your lab. Okay, so you got your rotate 3 and you got your counter. So please yell at me if you have any questions. Read all the comments definitely, and write the 2 tests once you get all the tests that I've written passing, and you are good to go. So the files that you modify are the ones that you turn in, so these 3, and that should do it. So lots of practice using pointers and also multiple files for this lab. Good luck, and please yell at me if you have any questions.